Hitchhiked 190 miles to Detroit, Michigan to join the United States Navy. He was declared a 4F, not fit for service, due to a stiff finger he had from boxing. Not willing to accept no for an answer, he had only one option: to head into downtown Detroit to find a doctor willing to cut his finger off so he could join his beloved Navy. He negotiated a price with the doctor so he would have about $3 left to afford a meal on his way back home. On December 7th, 1941, shortly before the 8 o'clock a.m. hour, he was perched in a communications tower 180 feet overlooking Pearl Harbor. As George told me, he had a panoramic view of the land, sea, and sky. He was part of 6 invasions of the Pacific Islands, including 2 to the Philippines and his last 2 at Iwo Jima. He was one of the youngest chiefs in the United States Navy. Since Pearl Harbor, he has happily pissed off historians who thought they knew what happened. He said that too. He is the last known Pearl Harbor survivor making public appearances and speeches. He has dedicated his remaining years to preserve the freedom of the people of the United States of America. He wants to share and educate anybody or any group that wants to learn about Pearl Harbor. And while I was with George, he told me, there's not many of us left, and soon, Wally, sorry, George. When I was with Wally, he told me, there's not many of us left, and soon you will only be able to read about Pearl Harbor in a book. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my sincere honor and privilege to introduce to you Pearl Harbor survivor, Mr. Delton E. Wally, Chief Signalman, United States Navy, retired.
Well, that's kind of hard to follow, isn't it? When he writes about you so much. But a little bit of it's true. You see, at Pearl Harbor, I'm the only one alive out of all of the 3 great admirals of the Pacific. I was with Richardson when he would not take the fleet to Pearl Harbor. When Roosevelt asked him to take it, the fleet to there, he said, I'm not taking it. We don't belong in the same waters with the Japanese. The Japanese in 1934, after World War I was over, all the countries agreed to keep their navies the same size. And everything went fine until 1934. That was about the time that Hitler started his rush through Germany and take over the country. Japan started at the same time, and they threw the treaty out and they started building a navy. And they built an enormous navy, a modern navy, and we sat still and never touched a thing, never touched any ships, nothing, until just before Pearl Harbor. The first carrier started just a few months before Pearl Harbor. So, on the day of the raid at Pearl Harbor, we had 3 carriers, they had 10. They had 102 destroyers, and we had a little over 50. So we didn't belong with them in the same waters. We couldn't stay with them. And so when Richardson was contacted by Roosevelt to take the fleet to Pearl Harbor, he refused. We don't belong in the same waters, so he wouldn't take it. And Richardson was thrown out. He was a wonderful, brilliant admiral. He was thrown out, and I'm sure that none of you people ever heard Richardson, a great man. Admiral Kimmel was 34 in line to take over the Pacific. And he done the same thing. He told Roosevelt, I don't want to take it, but I don't want to lose my rank. And so I'll take it and do the best he can. And so he brought us to the Pacific. And for a year and a half before Pearl Harbor, Kimmel rode us hard and put us up wet, but he taught all of us kids how to fight a war. You see, the word war, most people just think of the word war, but they don't see the after effects of war. They haven't been there, and we haven't been there either. So war didn't mean much. We're all just a big, happy family. So when December 7th came along, that morning, out at the entrance of Pearl Harbor, the destroyer Ward was patrolling the entrance. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, a submarine had been spotted, a midget submarine had been spotted between Honolulu and Pearl Harbor. And the Ward went to take a look, but they couldn't find it. And so they went back to sweeping the entrance of Pearl Harbor. And then we had a ship coming in, the Antares coming in from Palomar Island with a tow, a barge tow. And the barge tow was going to be shifted over to a tug to be taken in the harbor. And as they was changing over, another sub, Mitch's sub, got in between the two. And somebody on the ward spotted. And so they called their commander, and think about this, and the decision that this man had to make. That ship that morning, that was his first time on that ship, and that was his first decision to make. Do I shoot at that thing, or do I sink one of our subs? He had to make a decision. And when they came around, they was 150 yards away from that sub. And number one gun shot, but they were too close, and they overshot. Number three gun hit it in the waterline, and it started to sink. At the same time, there was a PY2I2 circling the top. Well, he didn't want to sink some peaceful sub either, so he wasn't getting in the act. But when he saw the Ward drop the torpedoes and also shot the sub, well, he dropped and the sub sank. Now, my commander was Admiral Kimmel, and in those days, they stuck right according to Hoyle, the way they had been taught. You didn't deviate away from the way it's supposed to be done. So they sent a message to my admiral, sighted sub in restricted area and sank. Well, he got his staff together and, well, wait a minute, we got to verify this. You can't verify it. It's down. We found out later it's down 1,142 feet, so you're not going to just verify. So they sent the same message back. We can't verify it. Well, we sunk it. It's set for 62 years on the bottom out there before it ever got verified. And the pictures over there on the wall, the man that sunk the submarine is there with me. 62 years later. They find the submarine sitting there on the sand with the 5-inch hole through it, and they go to the States and they find him. And they bring him out, put him in a bathoscope and put him down 1,142 feet. He was down there an hour and a quarter, and he verified it after 62 years. Now, that was the first incident at Pearl Harbor that nobody paid any attention to. The first thing that happened was radar was something new, brand new. And they didn't understand. The people that was working on it didn't understand it. And there was a couple boys coming back from Liberty that morning, and they stopped by and they took the practice on the radar. And when they turned it on, the radar is full of blimps. And those blimps on radar is airplanes. But not understanding what they're looking at, they didn't read it right. And so they call their commander over on the base and say, all these blimps are on the screen. And he said, oh, well, don't pay attention to that. He said, we got some B-17s coming in from the States, and they're using the Honolulu television, the radio, for beacon. And that's what it is. United States is that way. They're coming in from that way. But it didn't read with the commander at all. And he said, shut it down and go home. So that's exactly what they did. So that was the first instance. But remember, it would have made no difference, because all those ships at Pearl Harbor always anchored in the same spot, and they had been in the same spot for a year and a half. In Japan, it took many, many pictures of our ships. So they knew just exactly where every ship should be. So when Roosevelt cut off the iron and oil to Japan, he put their backs against the wall because they have no way of getting material to keep a war going. And so they're going to attack Pearl Harbor. Yamamoto was the great admiral of the Japanese. Very brilliant man. He went to Harvard. He went to our war college, and he had went all over the United States. And he knew the potential of what the United States could do if they were gearing up for war. And so when the war people said we're going to attack Japan, or attack Pearl Harbor, he said, we got to win the war in a year and a half or we're done. We cannot win the war against them. And they didn't believe that. But I wish that Yamamoto had lived to see his prediction, because that's what happened. He was right. So now at 7:56, I'm standing 180 feet in the air, overlooking every ship. You can see it. And all at once I look up and I see the cloud. It's a sky full of airplanes. Well, boy, we're having quite a maneuver today. The red balls are looking right at us, but do we recognize that? It doesn't sink in yet, because nothing has happened yet. They're just a bunch of planes. And then we saw those black objects. dropping out of that plane. Oh, well, something's wrong. But we still don't come to until those bombs hit Fort Allen. And now we are at war. We recognize it. Now this is how fast that 150-some planes can destroy a fleet if they're sitting in one spot. That first bomb hit us at 7:56. The Arizona blew up at 7:08. In that short period of time, 29 ships were sunk or damaged, and some of the installations. It only took that period of time. I went a little too far. I want to tell you about myself at Pearl Harbor. When I went aboard with Admiral Richardson, I didn't know nothing. I hadn't seen a pond bigger than a fish pond out and back. And now I'm more than this big back. And so we went to sea at San Diego, and we started up the coast to Bremerton, Washington. And we're on this big old batwagon. And I come out in the morning, and the ship is going over one wave and under two. My God, we're sinking for sure. That's all I could think about, because I'd never seen anything like that. But the other people didn't pay attention to it, so they said, this is all normal. Well, that was a great ride. Then I got up to Bremerton, Washington, and as I started to go aboard Richardson's ship, which is the flagship of the Pacific Fleet, that's a Pennsylvania. This old communication chief was standing out there, 30 years in the Navy, gravel voice and tough. I had ever had any discipline yet. I was about to get it. Because as I walked up that gangway, he said, "Sailor, step up." I didn't know what I'd already done wrong. So I stepped up, and he put me in the communication force. In World War II, all your communication was visual. They called us flag skivvy wavers out there with flags. That was what they called us. And they put me into this class. And they said, if you make it, you will jump 3 ranks in 6 weeks. In 6 weeks, I jumped 3 ranks, and I had a jump start in the Navy. Because in 3 years and 2 months later, I was a chief. Those admirals made me what I am today. They taught me what it was all about. So, after Pearl Harbor, well, I'll tell you about some ships first. There was only one ship at Pearl Harbor that was hit by a Japanese plane. There was 29 planes lost by the Japanese, but only one of them crashed on a ship, and that was on a cruise. They said, you hear people talking about kamikazes. We did not have kamikazes at that time. The kamikazes started at Lady Gulf. That's after the Japanese knew that they lost the war. And that's when they started with 25. So, good Lord, we are just in one awful mess. When you look down off that tower at 180 feet, and I saw it all. I saw it all after the fact. There is no way that you can stand there and see every ship hit at the same time. Because you got torpedo bombers, you got high-range bombers, you got planes strafing. So you got them all working at the same time. And every one of those pilots was like synchronized dancers. Because they practiced a year, about 3 planes to the ship. And they had to know where the other one was. If they didn't, they was going to crack up, because you only had a small area. And you see that board over there? I am taking that man that was on that one of those ships there back to Pearl Harbor with me on the 75th anniversary. He's going back after 75 years. My tower is right down from him. He's on that ship. And the planes that's bombing the California and the Oklahoma is flying under me about 40 feet down, going right in. And as they go by, he is shooting at those planes. And so you see that down at the side, there's by my tower over there in the corner. You see that little red stack? They shot that stack off. And I'm right in line. I can hear them bullets coming up across there. My God. It's a wonder they didn't shoot us off. So I'm going to take that same man that fired those shots, and I'm going to take him back. After 75 years, I'm going to take him back to Pearl Harbor and say, hey man, here's what you almost done. You almost shot me off. But in 15 minutes, it's all over. Everything's on fire. Battleship roll starts with the California. It's the first one in line. The second one is the Oklahoma. The Oklahoma rolled over in 15 minutes. The California sunk straight up and down. Now here is how the Japanese flyers was so dedicated. In between the two ships, which is only about 300 to 400 yards, up against Fort Island, was the Neosho, a tanker. Now that's loaded with gasoline. But because that Neosho was not supposed to be in Pearl Harbor, no one was assigned to it. And I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw that Neosho backing out through between the two ships that's sinking and pulled out and went over on the other side. They never touched it. Had they hit that Neosho, with the wind blowing the direction it was, and with everything afire in the water, in oil, it would have destroyed every ship we had. That's a mistake that the Japanese made. You can't believe that they wouldn't have hit it somehow. Now, the next ship in line was the West Virginia. And because that lines up with a channel coming in there, they hit that with 8 torpedoes. And because it was tied up to the Maryland, why, it was held enough so it sunk straight up and down. The Maryland couldn't be hit with torpedoes, only with bombs, and it was hit with a bomb. And then behind that was the Tennessee, and it was hit with a bomb, but no torpedoes. And behind that was your Arizona. And the Arizona, alongside the Arizona, was the vessel supply ship. And it was, they were working on the Arizona, and so that's what they were doing at the time of the raid. Well, the Arizona was being hit awful hard. And the vessel being on the outside of the Arizona took a couple torpedoes and they started to roll over and they got the other side, water in the other side of the ship and kept it from rolling over. And they backed away from the Arizona and went down on the bottom of the bay there and tied up and sank there in the mud. The Arizona at 8:06. Now you see the raid started at 7:56. At 8:06 it's all over because the Arizona is going to get hit. And I'm in that film as the Arizona gets hit. I didn't know it until this last year. This film is called Countdown to Disaster. And the film was taken by a doctor over on Fort Island, just a few hundred feet away. And he was standing there taking pictures of the Arizona being bombed. And with an old box camera, you can't enhance anything, see? But now you can. So this is what it's called. Countdown to Disaster, starting at 7:56. Then they go a couple of minutes on film, and then they shut it off. And then they'll say another 3 or 4 minutes before disaster, until they come down to 1 second before disaster. And as the bomb comes in to explode the airplane, they stop it right there off of the deck. You can look right there at it. And then they say, 1 second before disaster, then it blows. In about 2 frames afterwards, here I am in the flames, side view of me in the flames. They didn't ask me to put me in it. I didn't know I was there. This lady here sitting with me, we were sitting in the front row. They had invited us over to see this film. They didn't know I was in it either. So we're sitting there with the historian in the front row. Well, man, there I am. Can you imagine how I felt? You shot me out of that seat like a shot. Because here I am in that film. So, in 10 minutes, everything is over in Pearl Harbor. Now, here's another thing. Had the Japanese worked the workplaces all over, so we couldn't repair our ships. They never touched anything. They was only after ships, and so they touched nothing. Our oil tanks sitting right out in the open and never touched them. And we controlled all the oil all the way to the Philippines. And they never touched it. And that, right there, in the end, won the war for us in the Pacific. Because now we're able to jump on everything and repair, do what we want to do, and get things going. The Japanese on New Guinea, had shoved all the way to 12 miles north of Australia. Their next jump was in Australia. So you see, if we couldn't have got back and started repairing everything and building ships, we could not have stopped them from getting in Australia. That's another mistake that they made. And there was a message sent to MacArthur that day telling about the raid. And MacArthur said back to Roosevelt, everything is in order, don't worry about it. He never took those planes that sat on the runway out there never done a thing about it. The Japanese come in and destroyed all our planes in the Philippines. That's how. We weren't thinking very well in those days. So, I don't know whether I should go any further into the war in the Pacific, but I made every invasion of the Pacific. Iwo Jima was my last, and Iwo Jima was terrible. They had bombed it with everything. You wouldn't recognize nothing on Iwo Jima when we went in. Yet, 8,200 of our young kids got killed on Iwo Jima. At 10 o'clock in the morning, on the day that we got landed, I had 412 casualties back aboard at 10 o'clock in the morning, and 4 doctors aboard. 4 doctors can't take care of 400 young kids. And it's our young kids that won the war in the Pacific. From 17 to 21, that was about it. Because you was 23, you're considered the old man. Your young kids won the war in the Pacific. 110,000 young kids died in the Pacific. They are my heroes. They gave their life for the freedom that you folks have enjoyed for the last 75 years. I don't want you to forget them, but we are living in a terrible time. The war in the Middle East, we can't win it. They've been fighting each other for eons of time. And how do you think for a minute that we can stop that? When we went in and took out the dictators, then you opened up the country to all the others, and they all start fighting each other, and now look what you got. Our young kids today, 40% of the kids today are coming back little out of the bounds. We've got to take care of those kids. We owe them everything we can. And my God, how are we going to do that? If they keep sending them and we get them back, somehow we got to pay for this. And I don't know where we're going to get the money a little further down the line unless something happens. But 5 years ago when ISIS started, I made a crack about you're not going to be able to stop them unless you stop them now. Don't let them get started. And some guy, oh, you're nuts. Well, you see what ISIS is doing today and what they have done in the United States, and they're going to do some more. Because you could have a jacket on you and you say, well, I want to kill a bunch of people over there, and put your jacket on and go kill them. Anybody can do it. So who is ISIS? We don't know. We got to stay very alert in this country today. For shortly down the line, you will have another attack in the United States. Now, I would like to have, let me read this little thing about a teacher that made a visit to Iwo Jima. And it goes like this. So, I would say that some of you probably should get on a handkerchief. visiting our nation's capital, and each year I take some special memories back with me. This fall's trip was especially memorable. On the last night of our trip, we stopped at the Iwo Jima Memorial. This memorial is the largest bronze statue in the world and depicts one of the most famous photographs in history, that of the 6 brave soldiers raising the American flag at the top of a rocky hill on the island of Iwo Jima, Japan, during World War II. I watched those boys put the flag up. I was only about a quarter of a mile away. I was taking the casualties over the beach. Over 100 students and chaperones piled off the buses and headed towards the memorial. I noticed a solitary figure at the base of the statue, and as I got closer, he asked, "Where are you guys from?" I told him that we were from Wisconsin. Hey, I'm a cheesehead too. Cheesehead, and I will tell you a story. It was James Bradley, who had just happened to be in Washington, D.C., to speak at the memorial the following day. He was there that night to say goodnight to his dad, who had passed away. He was just about to leave when he saw the buses pull up. I videoed him as he spoke to us and received his permission to share what he had said from my videotape. It is one thing to tour the incredible monuments filled with this history in Washington, D.C., but it is quite another to get the kind of insight we received that night. When all hands had gathered around, he reverently began to speak. Here are his words that night. My name is James Bradley, and I'm from Antigua, Wisconsin. My dad is on that statue, and I wrote a book called Flags of Our Fathers. It is the story of the 6 boys you see behind me. 6 boys raised the flag. The first guy putting the pole in the ground is Hardin Block. Hardin Block was an all-state football player. He enlisted in the Marine Corps with all the senior members of his football team. They were off to play another type of game, a game called war. But it didn't turn out to be a game. Hardin, at the age of 21, died with his intestines in his hands. And I don't say that to cross you out. I say that because there are people who stand in front of this statue and talk about the glory of war. You guys need to know that most of those boys in Iwo Jima were 17, 18, and 19 years old. And it was so hard that the ones who did make it home never even would talk to their families about it. He pointed to the statue. You see the next guy, that's Gene Gagnon from New Hampshire. If you took Gene's helmet off at the moment this photo was taken and looked in the webbing of that helmet, you would find a photograph of his girlfriend Renee. Put that in there for protection. Because he was scared. He was 18 years old. It was just boys who won the battle of Iwo Jima. Boys, not old men. The next guy here, the third guy, is in this tableau, was Sergeant Mike Strang. Mike is my hero. He was the hero of all these guys. They called him the old man because he was so old. He was already 24. When Mike would motivate his boys in training camp, he didn't say, let's go kill some Japanese or let's die for our country. He knew he was talking to little boys. Instead, he would say, you do what I say, and I'll get you home to your mother. The last guy on this side of the statue is Ira Hayes. From Indian from Arizona. Ira Hayes was one of them who lived to walk off Iwo Jima. He went into the White House with my dad, President Truman, told him, "You're a hero." He told reporters, "How can I feel like a hero when 250 of my buddies hit the island with me and only 27 walked off?" So you take your class at school, 250 of you spending a year together, having fun, doing everything together. Then all 250 of you hit the beach, but only 27 of your classmates walk off alive. That was Ira Hayes. He had images of horror in his mind. Ira Hayes carried the pain home with him and eventually died dead drunk, face down, drowned in a very shallow puddle at the age of 32 years of age, after this picture was taken. The next guy going around the statue is Franklin Sousley from Hilltop, Kentucky, a fun-loving hillbilly boy. His best friend, who is now 70, told me, "Yeah, you know, we took 2 cows up on the porch of the Hilltop General Store. Then we strung wire across the stairs so the cows couldn't get down. Then we fed them Epsom salts. Those cows crapped all night." Yes, he was a fun-loving hillbilly boy. Franklin died on Iwo Jima at the age of 19. When this telegram came to tell his mother that he was dead, it went to the Hilltop General Store. A barefoot boy ran that telegram up to his mother's farm. The neighbors could hear her scream all night and into the morning. Those neighbors lived half a mile away. The next guy, as we continue to go around the statue, is my dad, John Bradley from Antigua. Where I was raised, my dad lived until 1994. But he would never give interviews. When Walter Cronkite's producers or the New York Times would call, we were trained as little kids to say, "No, I'm sorry, sir, but my dad's not here. He's in Canada fishing." "No, there is no phone there either." "No, we don't know when he is coming back." My dad never fished or even went to Canada. Usually he was sitting there right at the table eating his Campbell's soup, but we had to tell the press that he was out of fishing. He didn't want to talk to the press. You see, like Ira Hayes, my dad didn't see himself as a hero. Everyone thinks these guys are heroes because they are in a photo and on a monument. But my dad knew better. He was a medic. John Bradley from Wisconsin was a combat character. On Iwo Jima, he probably helped over 200 boys as they died. I have done the same thing. Because of all the invasions in the Pacific, we took the casualties off the beach. And with only 4 doctors, other people had to step in. And so I was there. I know what he's talking about. And when the boys died on Iwo Jima, they wreathed and screamed without any medication or help with pain. When I was a little boy, my 3rd grade teacher told me that my dad was a hero. When I went home and told my dad that, he looked at me and said, "I want you always to remember that the heroes of Iwo Jima are the guys who did not come back." And that's the way I believe, because of 110,000 young kids that died out there with me. There's no way that I'm here. So, that's the story. And now you come to the last. And just a moment, like, get this all So that's the story. 6 nice young boys, 3 died on Iwo Jima, and 3 came back as national heroes. Overall, they say in this story, over 7,000, but we lost 8,200 of our young boys at Iwo Jima. And 21,000 Japanese. That's how many was killed. There was more people killed in that battle than any battle in the world today. The worst battle in the history of the Marine Corps. My voice is giving out, so I will end it here. Thank you for your time. Suddenly, the monument wasn't just a big old piece of metal with a flag sticking out of the top. It came to life before our eyes with the heartfelt words of a son who did indeed have a father who was a hero. Maybe not a hero for the reason most people would believe, but a hero nevertheless. We need to remember that God created this vast and glorious world for us to live in freely, but also at a great sacrifice. Let us never forget, from the Revolutionary War to the current war on terrorism and all the wars in between, the sacrifice was made for our freedom. Please pray for our troops. Remind her every day that you can wake up free is going to be a great day. One thing I learned while on tour with the 8th grade students in DC that is not mentioned here, that if you look at the statue very closely and count the number of hands raising the flag, there are 13. When the man who made the statue was asked why there were 13, he simply said, the 13th hand was the hand of God. When you go home tonight and you're getting ready to sack it out, please think of all of our young kids today that's in the Middle East, and stop and say a prayer for them, for they will need it. If things keep going like they are today, we're in an awful mess. Thank you so much.
I think you got the tone and the purpose of our evening. To recap, the purpose was to raise money for fireworks. Even if we didn't make a single cent, let's just say all of our efforts broke even for the night. It paid for the room, the facility, everything, and we just broke even and we didn't make a penny. Hopefully, when you go home and come Independence Day and the week or weeks up to Independence Day, you can take what you learned tonight and what you know and do a little research and share it with your children, share it with your grandchildren, do whatever it is you need to do, because it is an absolute honor to be an American citizen and to go back and look at all of the efforts of all of the men and all of the women from day one of the United States military to current. There has been a huge, huge price that has been paid. And it is just humbling to meet people like Mr. Wally and to see the young men and women today fighting in the Middle East. It's just awesome. And often we're just blinded and we just really have no idea. So please take what you learned tonight and share it and make it worth your effort coming tonight. I appreciate you coming. Thank you for supporting our efforts and helping with the fireworks display. And just remember, when the fireworks are going off, just remember it's not just the fireworks, it's everything leading up to it. If you'll bow with me, I just want to say a quick prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for this evening. Lord, thank you for the opportunity to gather at the time of fellowship, to meet folks we have never met, Lord, and just to have the ability to gather here and speak freely and reflect on our history, Lord, what Independence Day is, and all of the efforts that our American military has served and the sacrifices not only them, but their families have made. Lord, I ask for a great rest of the weekend. I'm thankful for each and every one of these folks, and I ask that everyone get home safe and in one piece, Lord. We love you and we thank you for everything in which you've done and the freedoms in which you've allowed us. In your name we pray. Amen. Good night, go safely. If you need a ride home, please let somebody know. I'd be more than happy, and I think the chief will even give you a ride home. Red lights and all that good stuff. So, no, not like that, Chief. No handcuffs. Thank you very much, folks. Have a great evening. I appreciate your support.